Last week we were blessed to have a representative from the rescue mission to come here and share about the work that they do. The amazing thing is they do a lot more than what she was able to present. But when you think of the people they serve who are homeless, that is quite the difficult lifestyle to be in. A life that's trapped, one where people feel like they can't get out of it. For years, I had my mindset about homeless people, but it's not until you actually meet them and even experience many of the things yourself that you see what a trap those people are in. I didn't know more until we had a homeless man to come here almost every week. Several years ago, his name was Scott. He always sat back here in this direction. I would pick him up to bring him to church, then take him out to eat after church, and then take him back to his place. And all he had to live in was just a garage. He talked some people into letting him stay in their garage. Now, if your house is like most people's houses, everything that should be in the house is actually in the garage and it's packed. But the one that he had was just totally empty. It was a two-car garage, just a totally bare floor, walls and a roof, and one wicker-type love seat with some cushions on it. That was it. No dresser, no equipment, no nothing. That's where he lived. It wasn't until I picked him up for the very last time that I saw him gather all of his belongings on the floor and put them in one gym bag, and he said, "I'm ready to go." What do you do when you have a headache? You don't have a medicine cabinet. What do you do when you're thirsty? You don't have a refrigerator or water faucet. What do you do when you have to go to the bathroom? What do you do when you cut yourself and you're bleeding? You're just on your own. The life of a homeless person is difficult, and it's so easy for others who have an easy life to say things like, well, why don't they just get a job? Well, they do try. I was with Scott a few times when he was applying. He fills out the application. He puts his name. What does he put for an address? What does he put for a telephone number? If the future employer wants to hire him, how do they get a hold of him? They can't. So many of them go into a place to get hired, and the smell off of them is so bad, they already have an offense against them. One person in our church had that difficulty. I made a comment, you're having a hard time because about the smell. So the person bathed, and voila, they were able to get a job that week. But for people who don't have access to a bath, the homeless life is really difficult. I have never experienced it to the extreme, but I've had a small taste of it. I know what it's like to live in a 3-bedroom house that had only 2 pieces of furniture other than a bunch of metal chairs for church people to sit in. In the 3-story house, there was one table that could seat 4 people in the kitchen, and the only other piece of furniture was a bunk bed that was just the wooden frame. That was it, and all I had was one suitcase. And people say, well, just get a job. I tried to get a blue-collar job. They all said that I was overqualified. Then I tried to get a white-collar job. They said, we can't hire you because you don't have any experience. I can't get anywhere. I can't get more than just the minimum. Now, God met all my needs, so there's no complaint there. But there was already building into me this sense of, I'm being trapped. I'm not going to be able to get out of this world. By the way, speaking of people who are homeless, are you aware that Scott had his own business years prior? He owned a roofing company. Did you know that? So often people think homeless people are uneducated, unskilled, just people who are out there. Many of them have great education and formerly good jobs. But they're out there on their own trying to survive one day to the next. I mean, he even taught me some of the best places to find food. He told me which restaurants throw away their food at the end of the day so that you can go rummaging through their dumpster to get food. I've learned a lot about the homeless people. But our focus today is not about homeless people, but it's about all of us who have been in a more severe situation and oftentimes don't even know it. Would you open your Bibles to Colossians chapter 1? And in this passage, we're going to see Paul address some matters to the people of Colossae because they had a lot of bad thinking going on. And now when Paul writes to them, he puts this incredible focus on how great God is. Instead of addressing their minor issues, he addresses how great God is. And he shows what God has done for them. And that truly is an amazing source of encouragement and hope. And he gets us out of the dumps so many times because we focus on what he has done. So I want us to look at something that we've all been in, but maybe did not realize how bad our circumstance. So let's start with verse 12. And here we're going to look at a passage that God took us, helpless people, and he qualified us for greatness. He did the work. God took us as helpless people and then qualified us for greatness. Look now at verse 12. He says, giving thanks to the Father. Now that is a participle. It's one of many in the past few verses. So in chapter 1, beginning with verse 9, Paul says, I'm praying for you, and he mentions all these different ways, but we're focusing on this last one in verse 12, that he wants them to give thanks to the Father. Why? Because he has qualified us to share in the inheritance of the saints and light. I want to give a different picture before we go back to the passage. Every person in this room has been stuck in a very, very large mud pit, a miry pit. And you're trying your best to get out of the pit, and you can't. And while you're struggling, this limousine pulls up, perfectly clean, covered in gold. And you notice one of the windows going down, and it's God. And God says, hey, you can come right in my car if you want to, but you have to get out of that pit and clean up before you get in. And you're thinking, that's impossible. How am I supposed to get out of this pit? By the way, I found out this week that all these years of movies showing quicksand were telling lies. I didn't know it until just this week. There's no such thing as quicksand where people go in and eventually drown. But I found out such a popular topic in the 1960s that 1 out of 13 movies had stories of quicksand and people going all the way under. That's impossible. But there are miry pits in the Bible, and there's some even in Utah. In fact, just 4 years ago, there was a guy hiking, and he got in the mud pit, and he couldn't get out because in order to pull one foot out, you have to push harder than the other. So all he was doing was driving himself in. He had some devices on him to get help, so people finally showed up hours later to help him. But picture yourself, you can't get out of this pit. And there's this limousine. And God is saying, all you have to do is get out and clean yourself perfectly clean, and you can get in my limousine. Now that's a simple story, but that's getting towards the idea of what God did for us. And you're begging, I can't get out, please help me. Look at what the passage said, giving thanks to the Father who has qualified us. He did all the work. He qualified us, which means God is sitting in the car watching you struggle and not be able to get out of the mud pit. And he finally turns to his right and says, son, would you please help them? And the Son gets out of the car, pulls you out, and transforms you somehow. So between the mud pit and the car, all the junk and the mud and the trash just disappears, and you're able to go into the car. He did all the work. We have to be totally clean, and only He could do that. So when we look at that, He qualified us to share in the inheritance of the saints and light. And you finally get in the limousine and you say, wow, this is wonderful. Look at the brilliance. I mean, you didn't realize it, but while you were in the mud pit, it was actually dark and dingy, and you didn't even know which direction to go. Now you're in the limousine, it's like there are people, they're smiling, there's joy in here, there's a lot of light. And that's what takes place for Christians. After we have called to the Lord, cried out to Him, and accept what He has done. Let's go further with this. Let's go in the next few verses to see how He did this. In verse 13, we see He did this by rescuing us from a world of horror. I thought of a bunch of phrases to use, but maybe that was the best. I could have worded it word for word from the passage. Verse 13 says, He rescued us from the domain of darkness. Now, the word rescue means rescue. Nothing fancy about that one. The word darkness obviously means more than just no light. It means people don't even know where they're going. They just stumble around. I watched a Billy Graham video special last night off the internet, and a guy who went to Iraq and fought had shrapnel to go in both eyes. He's totally blind, and he said he went to the swimming pool to learn how to live without eyes, and he said he got lost in the street, and he's crying out, and nobody would help him. No one heard him. For 30 minutes, he's out there with his red and white stick trying to find help and direction. Well, that's what He means by darkness. It's more than just that the lights are out. You don't even know where you're going. And that's the picture of every non-Christian in our world around us. The vast number of people think life is fun, but deep down inside they're in darkness. They really don't know for sure where there's meaning and purpose for living. But I now want to go to the word domain in my translation. The word that's there in the original language is usually translated power or authority. And when you put it together with the idea of darkness, you can see how many translations today have chosen domain. The domain of darkness. But I want to expand that a little bit more for its truest sense. It's the realm of darkness. It is the trap of darkness, the incarceration, the bondage, the control, the lostness, not having any idea where to go, and being guaranteed there's no hope for getting out. I'm glad there was an illustration this week that I can use for the message, but the illustration is almost so bad it almost brings tears to our eyes. Did you hear about the sheriff's deputies who went to a house north of Columbus to issue a warrant to a man who had done something wrong 4 times, and it's time now for him to be arrested? And after they go into this seemingly abandoned house, it's a 5-room house with 1 bathroom, and all of a sudden a door opens and he looks inside, and there are 16 kids who have lived in that room almost since birth, or since they moved into that house. The police have tried to talk to the kids. What's going on? What happened? And the kids can't talk. They haven't even been around people who talk. They don't even know how to talk. The oldest girl is 18 and doesn't even know how to spell her name. These kids have been trapped. That's where I'm heading here. Non-Christians are trapped in a room and they can't get out. Some people say, well, why didn't they call the police? They don't even know what a phone is. What's the police? They don't even know how to talk. Well, why didn't they jump out a window? Where would they go? As far as they know, only 20 people live on planet Earth. The 16 kids, the 2 parents, and the grandparents. Those are the only people they've probably seen their entire life. They're trapped. They are there. That is a picture of non-Christians. It's misery, no life. Can we really try to move into this picture? I know if you've never been homeless, if you've never had difficulties, it's hard to realize living in this. But every non-Christian is there, even if they don't admit it. Even if they have millions of dollars and pleasures galore, they lay their head down every night wondering, when will I experience real life? Let's move on to the second area. The first thing that Jesus did for us was rescuing us from a world of horror. Let me add one more comment. Did you notice how in verse 13, when God pulls us out, he pulls us out of a domain of darkness. Remember the very last word of verse 12? We become the saints in light. I mean, what a difference. From darkness, not knowing where we're going, what's happening in life, where's left, where's right, to a world of brilliance and light. The next thing mentioned is the second half of verse 13, transferring us to his wonderful kingdom. Transferring us to his wonderful kingdom. The words specifically in the second half of verse 13 are transferred us to the kingdom of his beloved Son. Now I know the first illustration I gave about a limousine is a terrible illustration because you don't enter a limousine, you enter his whole heaven. But there's one extra point. Your body is still on planet Earth. So there's a challenge here. Your body hasn't changed one bit when you become a Christian. But your mind and your emotions, your insides, your soul gets to experience, if you so choose, this world of light and freedom. The word for transferred, I know this is a silly illustration, but I like to think of Star Trek and the word transported. You know, when that series began, they were creating it. How can we do this? They realized we can't have this Starship Enterprise landing on all these different planets for every TV show. We're going to waste so much time with all this filming, and how are you going to film that? So they came up with this idea called transporting people. Well, you know what happened. They go into a certain room, they push a few buttons, and then their body turns into energy, and it's transported over to the top of a planet far away. And it comes back. Well, go in the opposite direction. How is it possible for someone on some faraway planet in that TV series to go into Starship Enterprise? There's no way. They can't jump up high enough on the planet to jump inside the USS Enterprise. That's the idea here. So by being transported by the people on the controls, that's the same way for us as non-Christians. Life is empty. Life is boring. There's absolutely no hope at all for us. But when we become a Christian, God takes our soul and transports us into this new world of light and joy and excitement. So our bodies haven't transferred yet, but our souls have, and we get to experience this life. And I want to keep you reminded of our key thought. The very first words of verse 12 are, we need to give thanks to God for all of this. Now, can I pause for a moment and ask, how well do you recognize your past world of darkness? If you became a Christian at a very young age, you don't know as much. And that's not a bad thing. But for those of you who became a Christian late in life, your understanding of what God pulled you out of is so much greater. Remember the story of the woman who was kissing Jesus' feet and washing his feet with her hair. And the religious leader was upset, and Jesus said there were two men who were in debt, one $50, one $500. They were both forgiven. Who do you think was the most grateful for being forgiven? Well, the one who owed the most. Exactly. And for those of you who've done the worst before becoming a Christian, another way of saying that is you became a Christian late in life. You understand what God pulled you out of. It means so much more to you. But where are you? Did you become a Christian at a young age that you really don't know how miserable your life was? And that's what this passage is trying to remind us of. Our life was miserable without God. And now we have joy and peace, accessible at all moments. Let's go to the third area. He did everything mentioned already because Jesus redeemed us. Verse 14 begins with the phrase, in whom we have redemption. Now I want us to go a little bit further with this limousine illustration. You're in the mud. You're totally covered with mud. The limousine pulls up. God rolls his window down. He says not only you need to be perfect and be totally clean, and you need to crawl out of the pit yourself to be in the car. He goes one step further. Redemption means I'll even let you join my family. You get to sit at the table and eat. You don't have to be like Lazarus wanting to sit under the table and hope some crumbs fall. God is saying, you join my family. Take another illustration. How about Cinderella? The world tries to come up with its best picture. So what was she, a fairy, a godmother? I don't know what it was, but some angel-y type woman comes up to Cinderella, taps her over the head with a magic wand, and she becomes some beautiful woman. In real life, that's not what takes place. Jesus comes to you in your midst of mud and sin and filth. He's the one who taps you over the head and makes you his own and marries you. Think of the people who offend you on a regular basis. Think of the people who have talked about you in public, put you down, falsely accused you. That's who we were before we became a Christian. We were enemies of God. We were blasphemers. And God loved us so much with our filth that he said, I love you if you'll just join me. I'll clean you up and let you join me. And I'll even let you join my family. I mean, this is an incredible picture of what God has done for us. He didn't wait for some fairy over there to change us and make sure we were wearing our glass slippers for him to marry us. No, he initiated the process looking at our selfishness, our arrogance, our unwilling to confess faults, our blaspheming, our filthy words which disrespect God's name. And he loved us so much, he reached out to us and said, I want you to join my family. What an amazing God. And then look at the second half of verse 14. He forgave us of sins. For it says, the forgiveness of sins. Forgiveness requires two parts. One is, God is willing to push aside the consequences, and we have to accept that, but there's still one other aspect. The sin has to be punished. In order for him to forgive us, his son had to take the punishment. I had a conversation with a Muslim just a few weeks ago. And he said, but Allah just forgives. He can't. He cannot forgive. If he even existed. He doesn't exist, but even if he did, he can't forgive and overlook the punishment. Punishments have to be delivered. So when we read this passage, forgiveness of sin, it sounds as if God just, sure, I'll forgive you. But there's more to it. Someone had to take the punishment. And Jesus did. Can we go back to verse 12 and look at what the passage says? Giving thanks to the Father, who He was the one who qualified us to share in the inheritance of the saints and light. In just a moment, we will participate in the Lord's Supper. If the Lord is leading you in a different direction to respond, and you do whatever the Lord leads, but a direction I would like to lead you to approach is when you look at this and you see the bread that represents Jesus' broken body, and when you look at the drink and it represents his blood, would you have a grateful heart and say, thank you, Lord, for what you have done for me? And if you really, really, really want to say thank you to him, then would you recommit your life to him and say, God, I appreciate you so much for what you did. I'm going to forsake all my desires, all my plans. From this point forward, I will do whatever you say. You are worthy of my life.